Okay, so like with Clockworks, we got a fan-made archetype itself, which is used in Yu-Gi-Oh! Unleashed. This time, Swarmaney's. Personally, I'm not much of an insect deck expert. I don't have a problem with any insect decks, it's just that usually when I use them, I lose. That's not the deck spot, it's just that I am just not good with insect decks, personally. I don't know, I can just never figure them out. But yeah. So, like with the Clockwork video, just gonna go through it, say if the card's good or not, and that's pretty much it. You know, not gonna go into like how this is gonna help combo off with other decks, you know? Yeah. Anyway, enough of the BS.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, once again, and welcome to a new series I'm planning on doing. As Yu-Gi-Oh! Unleashed has progressed, I've made.
You can tell the fantasy archetype reviews weren't. Fantasy archetype reviews, that's my series. This wasn't done in order.
Stand out in its own unique way. So, very similarly to how my What If support videos work, I'm going to be doing videos called What
Then again, I guess I should be grateful that they're at least, they may not be in order, but at least they're all in a playlist.
Today, we're starting with Swarmaney.
So hey, it's better than nothing.
Swarmaney was an archetype used by Bit Insector in Yu-Gi-Oh! Unleashed. The deck's main focus is supporting the cards in the archetype and stunning the opponent through spreading Swarm.
The main gimmick of the archetype is supporting the archetype.
I
Isn't that
actually
every
got the
deck's idea?
of Swarmaney cards from kids' TV shows and movies I used to watch as a kid, which were insect related. Also, the idea of Swarmaney cards is that their ability to spread counters on the field, mostly based on the idea how most of the cards in the archetype are based on different insects that swarm around you.
The fact there's so many counters means the brains would love it. They had a counter fetish.
Placed in the archetype through their ability to spread counters to stun the opponent and benefit themselves. As for the name Swarmaney itself, it's actually a pun. It's a combination of swarm and colony.
Oh!
Swarmaney.
Huh.
So with that said,
Never
I'm
actually
Code
put
9.
that together. Like, I
Here
got
are
the
all
swarm
cards
half, but never
I
thought the
made for
colony part.
Swarmaney archetype so far in Yu-Gi-Oh! Unleashed.
I learned something new today. Monster Cardos. Lemon Bee is a Lights level 2 monster with at 13-16 o'clock. No, I'm kidding. Joking. It's an insect effect, 800 attack, 600 defense. It's safe to say they're all going to be insects, so I'm just going to skip that part. When this card is summoned, in any way, apparently, place one swarm counter on one face-up card on the field. If this card is in your graveyard, you can remove one swarm counter on either player's field, and if you do, special summon this card. You can only use this effect of Swarmaney Lemon Bee once per turn, and only once that turn. It's a pretty good summoner. On summon, put a counter on something, and then when it's in the graveyard, you could just remove that counter you probably just put on, bring it back, and then use it for something else. Nice. Swarmaney Apple Ant, a level 3 fire monster. I'm sorry, Swarmaney. 1200 attack, 600 defense. I can't read. When this card is summoned, I'm just going to assume, going forwards, they're all going to say summoned in any way, so you could just assume whatever you want on it. When this card is summoned, place one swarm counter on one face-up monster on the field. Once per turn, when a Swarmaney monster or monsters other than Swarmaney Apple Ant is special summoned to your field, you can add one Swarmaney monster or polymerization from your deck to your hand. Ah yes, it's a fusion archetype, I forgot to mention that. Which is different considering most of the insect archetypes are either synchro or link based, with maybe an Xyz. So we don't have a fusion one. Unless you want to count the frickin' fusion Beat Trooper thing from the Link archetype. I forget the name of the new Link archetype, I just know they got a fusion for some fucking reason. Anyway. Yeah, on summon, put a swarm counter on something, and then if another monster is summoned besides this, which could probably be the Lemon Bee you just sent away earlier, or you can add either a Swarmaney or a Poly to from your deck to your hand. Nice and versatile. Easy to do. Three of these cards actually existed, of course. Swarmaney Tangreen Firefly, a Lights level 1. No, Tangerine Firefly. 300 attack, 200 defense. When this monster is summoned, place one swarm counter on one face-up card, any card, on the field. If there is a card on the field with at least one swarm counter, you can special summon this card from your hand. That's handy. If this monster was special summoned by this effect, you can banish this card from your GY, except the turn this card was sent. And if you do, draw one card. You can only use this effect of Swarmaney Tangerine Firefly once per turn. It's handy. On summon, it puts a swarm counter on the field, and this thing has a good special summoning condition by removing a swarm counter, which you can probably just put it right back on again after it's summoned. And of course, here's the next turn, you can just banish it, get a free draw. Handy little bugger, isn't it? Yep. Bugger, I see what I did there. Swarmaney Blueberry Beetle, an Earth level 4 monster. 1600 attack, 1200 defense. When this card is summoned, place one swarm counter on one face-up card on the field. If you control 2 or more Swarmaney monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. Once per turn, you can remove 2 swarm counters on other players' field. Fusion summon in one monster from your extra deck by using monsters on your field or in your hand as fusion materials. I was about to be pissed at this thing for being a super poly, but it's not, so it gets passed. So yeah. On summon, it puts a swarm counter on things. You're probably going to see that a lot going forward, so maybe I should do the freaking, like, TGS anime and just stop mentioning it going forward, but I don't know. If you control 2 or more, you can just special summon this guy, and then, like, remove 2 swarm counters and fusion summon without poly. So, handy, little bugger. Yeah, I need to stop doing that. Swarmy Cherry Ladybug, Fire level 3. 1300 attack, 800 defense. When this card is summoned, you know the drill. Once per turn, you can discard one Swarmaney monster, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand. Then all swarm counters on the field are doubled. That's very powerful. like yeah, if you got like 1 on the field, putting it to 2 isn't that big of a deal. If you got like they all stack up, yeah, that's gonna be a lot, and just the ability to double anything and just automatically oof, you know. So yeah. Handy. Spells and traps. Swarmaney Nest, a field spell card. Of course, it's a beehive. During another player's standby phase, place 1 swarm counter on all face-up cards in the field. Sort of like your Cloudy and Squall, your frickin' A-Cell reproduction device thingamafudger. You know, there's some archetypes with continuous spells that can do this sort of effect, so this is nothing new. Except it's on a field spell now. All cards in the field. All insect monsters you control gain 100 attack for each swarm counter placed on them. All non-insect monsters your opponent controls lose 100 attack for each swarm counter placed on them. When this card is activated, add 1 Swarmaney monster card from your deck to your hand. Adds any Swarmaney card from your deck to your hand. Including probably a second copy of itself as it could, but, you know, then you have a tune table of contents scenario. But hey, this thing's pretty handy. It puts swarm counters on everything during both players' standby phases, and your monsters are getting stronger from this, while theirs are getting weaker. Unless they're playing insects too, in which case, it's neutral. But then you just focus on putting as many counters on yourself as possible, so meh. Handy. I'm surprised it's not even one of my pep results, you can carry it. Anyway, Absolute Swarmaney, a normal spell. If you control no monsters, you can reveal any number of Swarmaney monsters in your hand. If you do, place 1 swarm counter on a face-up card on either player's field for each monster revealed by this effect. Very handy. But wait, it says that you could. If you do place a swarm counter on a face-up, well, I guess if you control a face-up like field spars, then you can put like a swarm counter on that. Because just like you put a swarm counter on any card on the field. Well, if you have to control no monsters, you're not putting them in any of your monsters. You can banish this card from your GUI, except the turn this card was sent to the GUI. Send 1 card on your field to the GUI that has 2 swarm counters or more. Then draw 2 cards. You can only use each effect with Absolute Swarmaney once per turn. It's a pretty handy effect. It's just yeah, you can just banish it from your graveyard, and then send a card from your field to the graveyard if it has 2 or more swarm counters, and draw 2 cards from it. Handy. It's a bit of a bummer if you got more than 2, but odds are you're probably not going to get rid of it then. Unless you just need the resources. Swarmaney Prisoner, a continuous trap. If this card is activated, place 1 swarm counter on all face-up cards in the field. Another one of these. If your opponent activates a card or an effect, you can remove 2 swarm counters from either player's field, and if you do, negate the activation of that card and destroy it. You can only use this effect with Swarmaney prisoner once per turn. A continuous negation trap that just requires you to remove some swarm counters. Very handy indeed. Obviously, you play it. Swarmaney Sting, another continuous trap. If a monster your opponent controls that has a swarm counter on it battles an insect monster you control, you can negate the attack, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the number of swarm counters on that attacking monster. This is not a once per turn. Odds are, if you've got this base up, your opponent is not attacking again, depending on how many swarm counters there are, because you can just negate the attack and burn. Obviously, you play it. Just hope your opponent runs MSD. At least you hope if you're the opponent play MSD. Fusion monsters, like other background removal. Swarmaney Vanilla Wasp, a level 5 dark monster. 2 insect monsters cannot be summoned with instant fusion. When your opponent special summons a monster, you can place 1 swarm counter on this card. As long as there is at least 1 swarm counter on the field, face-up insect monsters you control cannot be destroyed or tributed by card effects. The MCO isn't a card effect. Well, there's probably some obscure ruling thing, but hey, that's pretty handy. On special summon, it places a swarm counter on the field, and as long as there's a swarm counter, you're immune to everything. You got 2300 attack, 1400 defense, not bad. Just put this thing in defense mode, and you're good. Assuming they have a monster that's strong, and otherwise it's going to be attack mode, obviously. Mind you, you're still susceptible to, battle, but it's protection. Swarmaney Salt Mosquito, a dark level 8 monster. 1 Swarmaney monster plus 1 monster with a swarm counter, or counters. 2700 attack, 2100 defense. When this monster is fusion summoned, place 1 swarm counter on a face-up card on the field, equal to the level of one of the card's fusion materials. So if you used a level 8 monster, you can put 8 counters on this thing, which is handy. Let me see, one of this card's fusion materials. As long as this card is face-up on the field, the cards that have swarm counters on them are negated, except insect and or swarmy cards. And or cards that list insect and or swarmy cards. Okay, so to read through that bunch of words, basically as long as this card's face up, cards that have swarm counters on them have their effects negated unless they're either swarmy monsters or cards that list insect type or swarmany cards. It's a very specific floodgate, but it's also a very powerful one because of it. Also, it's got 2700 attack, so oof. And then they summon Blue Eyes White Dragon. Fuck! And of course, and you can only have 1 Swarmaney Salt Mosquito face up on the field. Just to even it out, but I think this thing has the whole Last Warrior of another planet or something like that effect, where it's like, yeah, there's only one because it's the only one that's going to be mattering by the end of this. Bugtopia, Queen of Swarmaney, a dark level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 monster. It's the big boss monster of the archetype. It is, of course, a insect fusion, that takes 1 insect fusion monster and 1 or more monsters with swarm counters. It has 3400 attack and 2000 defense. It must be fusion summoned. It cannot be summoned by other ways. When this card is fusion summoned, transfer all swarm counters that were on this card's fusion materials to this card. So if you use a card that had a bunch of Swarmaney counters on it, which could be even more concerning, one of them doubles the Swarmaney counters, you can put them all onto this bad boy. Also, banish all cards with swarm counters on them except insect and or swarmy cards, and or cards that list insect and or swarmy cards. So it banishes everything except everything that the last guy said, Basically that, except they're banishing them instead of negating their effects, which is very powerful, obviously. Hey, but it's going to take an insect fusion monster and one that has specifically swarmy counters. You're going to need it to be a big boy, or big girl in her case. This card gains 100 attack for each Swarmaney counter placed on it. If this card would leave the field due to a card effect, you can remove 2 swarm counters from this card instead. Given the fact there's one that just negates the whole special and the card effect instruction, that's not much of a threat. But hey, you're removing 2 for this thing, and you're only removing 1 for the other, so meh. Actually, I don't think you remove 1. I think it's just you can in general, so meh. But this thing has 100 attack for each swarm counter on it. Given the fact that the field spell also boosts power, this thing could get to ridiculously high attack stats. And then someone frickin' activates block attack and puts it in defense mode. You bitch! They give the other one negates effects, but not really a threat now, is it?
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the first episode of What If Archetype. So, what other archetypes from Yu-Gi-Oh! Unleashed do you
We
want
got
us to
Clockwork
do?
later, so we don't need to worry
Comment
about
down
that.
below, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.
So yeah, that's it. It's a pretty cool archetype. It'd be nice if it was real, but I'm not gonna be over the moon if we don't get it. I'm just waiting for the Inzectors, considering we have waited over a year for them. Then again, they've already shown one of the artworks, so we're going to get it eventually. And just think, the Creative Card Tournament was over a year ago, and we've already had 2 things that lost the Creative Card Tournament before the one that won it. We got a Sylvan, technically, and we got a frickin' Encipher, which is an honorary photon. But now I'm complaining about something else entirely. Anyway, cool archetype, later.